Police have just battered down this door in London. They have detained an adult male who they believe is in charge of running one of the many county lines operations, smuggling drug operations. This one is between London and Brighton. Pretty horrifically, we know it uses children. Last year, about 3,000 children were exploited and groomed by drug gangs to transport substances like crack cocaine and heroin in this case around the country. This is one of about 6,000 county lines gangs identified last year. It's a pretty dramatic operation. About a dozen police officers battered down the door. They ran in screaming that they had a warrant for an arrest. And even from outside where we were, you could hear the situation inside. The police ran in there. They quickly identified an adult male in the house. He was quickly arrested, detained. They then went around searching the different rooms in the house, saying one after another, all clear, all clear. They're now dealing with the suspect inside. It's a pretty horrific operation, this. It sounds like crack cocaine and heroin, very hard illicit substances, have been transported from London to Brighton at one of these county lines operations. Now this is where drugs are smuggled outside of an area into another, often using very young children to be able to do this. With us today on this pretty dawn raid is the Policing Minister, Dame Diana Johnson. We're going to be speaking to her about what she saw and about the wider issue with county lines gangs and how this new Labour government is going to try and crush the problem.
It's the first raid I've been on as the Policing Minister, and I think I've just been incredibly impressed by the way that this was dealt with in a very professional way, clearly making sure that everyone was safe and that the suspect was apprehended and then taken off to the police station. So a successful raid. I was really pleased to come and see this for myself because I do think that the county lines work that's going on in policing is something that is so important because it's about the most violent drug supply network that we know exists, and it's using children, it's exploiting children. So this is why it's so important that this work is happening. I think this county lines way of supplying drugs often involves violence, the use of knives, and of course the government is saying we want to halve the knife crime in this country over the next decade, so this is a key part of that, tackling the violence within county lines. It's about children being exploited, and I think for drug users they need to remember that children, so these are often the most vulnerable children, are ending up being groomed and used by gangs to supply drugs. That has to be dealt with, and we have already, as the government said, we're going to have a specific offence of child criminal exploitation that we will be bringing forward and using for the people who are running these county lines. County lines are the most serious, violent drug supply lines in this country involving children, and those who are running these lines will be held to account and will face the full force of the criminal justice system. What I can tell you is that the Home Secretary has already announced there's going to be £500 million more going into policing for next year. So there is more money going into policing. The government recognise how important it is to keep people safe and secure in our communities. We've got our neighbourhood policing guarantee to get 13,000 more police officers, specials and PCSOs back into our neighbourhoods. So that money has already been announced. There'll be further announcements in the weeks to come around the specific amounts for each police force. I think the government have been really clear what the priorities are for policing as far as we're concerned, and it is about keeping neighbourhoods safe, investing in our neighbourhood policing guarantee, dealing with antisocial behaviour. Tackling county lines is a key part of that because we know it's about violence in our communities and it's about exploiting the most vulnerable children. So absolutely, this is what the police should be doing. This is what we want them to spend their time on. But of course, there are times when using intelligence and non-crime hate incidents being reported by the police is useful in the longer term if you're building up a picture where there may be, for example, problems around community tensions and cohesion, particularly with the rise of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia that we've seen very sadly in the last couple of years.
We're here with Detective Chief Superintendent Dan Mitchell, who heads up the police's county lines operations across the country. How important are raids such as this to flushing out criminal networks?
So they're really important. So the work we've done this morning, we've come down to Plumstead and we've gone to the premises of a county lines drug dealer. He's working with another guy and they're part of a criminal gang and they're running a drugs line from London here in Plumstead. It goes out down to Brighton, Surrey, Sussex, in that area, affecting the local community there, where we've got people who are buying crack and heroin from the drugs line. And importantly and worryingly, we've got young children, so children 15, 16, who are operating on that line to sell the drugs for these guys. So really important that we come here this morning and arrest this man and make sure that he goes to prison and faces justice. It's really important that we spot the signs. We've got a partnership with the Children's Society, and it's a hashtag Look Closer campaign. So go to the Children's Society website, have a look at the resource materials on that website. There's some fantastic information about how you can spot the signs. But what we're really talking about here are children who are vulnerable, so it can happen to anybody. A lot of the grooming that happens can be done through technology, so we've got some, we really need social media companies to do more in this space. They need to help make their platforms and their content that is hosted safe and make sure they protect children. Obviously we know people are going onto social media at ever more younger ages, and obviously this then enables them to see content that maybe isn't something that years ago, and certainly when I was much younger, we had like a TV watershed, for example, and you couldn't get onto this content. Now you can on social media, so that's a challenge, and we need social media companies to do more in that space. And also then criminal gangs will use social media apps to communicate and to talk to children, to make them think this is what they want to do and to groom them in. But then once they're working on the line, it's a very different environment. It's not what they're made to think it's going to be, and they can be involved in serious violence. So we know that county lines drug supply, particularly children who are involved in county lines drug supply, they can often be involved in serious youth violence, either as perpetrators or victims. And that's not surprising really, because we've got gangs like this in London. They're giving the drugs to children to go out to Brighton and sell, so they have to have weapons to protect themselves from other rival gangs who might want to steal what they've got, the cash, the commodity, and they might end up in that kind of activity. So what we're doing here is about making sure that we stop that happening. We seize the weapons, we seize the drugs, we protect the children. And that contributes to the new government's Safer Streets mission. So any child can be drawn into county lines. We can have children from really well-to-do families, children from nice backgrounds, families that have had have lots of wealth. But more commonly, it affects children from really vulnerable children with real vulnerabilities, children from areas of deprivation. We often have children from care homes drawn into, exploited onto county lines. We have children with educational needs, or people who've grown up in homes where we've had drugs and alcohol abuse, domestic violence, those kind of things. So what we're really looking for is for people to know and understand that it can happen to anyone, but it particularly happens to children who are vulnerable and have additional needs. So it's about trying to make sure that we look out for things like, have you seen your child start to have an extra rucksack that they're very protective of? They don't want you to know what's in it. Have they suddenly got some money? Are they behaving in an odd way? Do they look like they haven't washed for a few days because maybe they've been exploited and groomed and made to think they want to do it, but actually then held in a house where drugs are sold and made to stay there for 3 days and can't wash, can't really eat properly, can't sleep properly, those kind of things. So can you see the signs? Have they been physically beaten? It's those kind of things that we want people to look for and then report that to police. And our focus is about preventing county lines, protecting children, and then going after the adults like these guys who are part of criminal gangs who are exploiting and abusing those children. And we work really closely with Catch-22, with Action for Children, to help children who are involved in county lines, who are committing criminal offences, like serious criminal offences like selling Class A drugs, help them get out of that life, and by diverting them away with specialist support provision, people who really understand, maybe people who've lived it, understand what difficulties they face, and then going after the people who are older, often violent, who are exploiting them. A lot of work's gone into this morning, a lot of effort, energy, understand what type of premises, what type of environment we're operating in, and make sure that as best as possible we can plan really thoroughly for what we're going to do, and then it's well-trained officers executing that, so we go straight through the door and get people arrested and secured safely. It all really starts with the drug supply base of operations, which often can be a cocooned premises, maybe it's like a derelict house, and that'll be a base of operation to sell crack and heroin, and sometimes now, more recently, synthetic opioids, and that will go out, so for this drug line, the community in Brighton, And what we need is the local neighbourhood officers to get the intelligence to tell us on the task force that, right, there's this drugs line operating, and then we would use our investigative techniques to find out who is running those lines, come down here, find where they live, and once we've got the evidence ready, come and make the arrest.
So a man's just been arrested here on this police raid this morning in South London. It's part of a county lines intensification week where forces across the country come together, they share intelligence, and they try to flush out these organised criminal networks which smuggle drugs across county borders. Police have arrested and taken away a man believed to be involved in drug trafficking from London down to Brighton, crack cocaine, heroin, using children. We've just managed to grab a word with the policing minister, Dame Diana Johnson, and she told us that intensification weeks like this are the real priority of the police. It's what they should be doing, bread and butter policing, not going around people's houses policing social media, but actually protecting children and crushing crime, which is rife on our streets at the moment. Obviously times are incredibly tough financially for the government at the moment, and the Chancellor Rachel Reeves has made clear that they're going to have to be very strict spending restraints on departments, but the minister told us that policing is not going to be facing the huge cuts which some have feared, because this is one of their top priorities. Keir Starmer has made clear that tackling antisocial behaviour, other hard crimes such as drug trafficking, which we're here today, is one of his top priorities, cleaning up our streets, which many voters are angry with at the moment. And so hopefully in the coming weeks, months and years under this Labour government, we're going to be seeing more operations like this. The Met were, I have to say, incredibly professional with how they handled this situation. It was very, very interesting to watch them at work here today, and hopefully there'll be many more of these to come. He didn't say much as he came out of the house. He was led by a couple of police officers. They searched his property here in South East London, and then they thrown him into the back of what's been described to us as a pretty high piece of kit van. Rather than just having the sort of cell at the back, it also has an incredible amount of technology. It has all the kit you need to use to be able to carry off one of these pretty daring operations, such as the one we've just witnessed.